Today I'm going to look into this, and this is a HP tin client, and this is a dumpster find. I actually found 4 of these in a dumpster downtown. I've just put this paper on to hide what company actually threw these away, and you can see they're really nice treated. They haven't even taken off the plastic from the HP logo. And it's a well-equipped machine. It takes the normal HP power jack from the laptops. It has 4 USB ports on this side, 2 display ports, 1 VGA and the Ethernet. And it also has some protection from stealing that you can put into this. It has a ISO fastening platform, and it has the technical specification hidden here on this tab. And this model number for this is TPC W016, and the series of this is the HP T520 flexible series. And I do believe that this has an AMD kind of CPU, kind of something among the Celeron or Atom line of things from Intel. That is a low-cost CPU, probably dual core, probably 64 bits at this time. And I think we will first try to see what lurks inside before we try to see what else we can do with this box. Take the bottom off first to see if there is any more screws hiding, and there was not. And you have some small screws that's here. I don't know what you have to do to get this case open, but we will get there. And the 4th screwdriver I tested actually fit the screw so that I can get them loose. There should be a sliding mechanism to this, but the lid is stuck, so I have to pry a bit to loosen it up. But okay, there it opened, so now we can take the lid off. Yeah, and what do we have here? We have a SanDisk, and this is an SSD of 16 gigabytes. You do have a barrel jack, you do have a socket here, maybe for wireless, probably. You do have a memory chip, and this is of course, or probably upgradable. So this is DDR3, 4 gigabyte memory. And you do have some cooling fins here with some heat pipe that leads over here. And the metal kind of this is melted into the plastic, so the metal here is not going to come out. But of course we can take out the screws for the main board and try to lift that out and see what happens. Try not to break anything around the CPU and the heat pipe. Yeah, everything seems nice and shiny, no leaking caps or anything. So I will try to take out the main board. We also have a switch here, CMOS. This is probably to reset CMOS settings. The 5 screws has a combined head for Torx and a flat screwdriver. When the screws are gone, it's just to slide out the board. Okay, and there you have the back side. The Jasper motherboard revision B, made in China. And I can take out this screw, and there also was some other thing loose inside of it. It was a piece of plastic. And you have a small speaker that's still connected to the case. We can of course take out this plug, like so, and then the motherboard is completely free. So this is a highly integrated unit, and I wonder what we can actually do with it. And I also wonder what kind of operating system this came installed with, or I probably don't need to wonder about that, because I do think it's stated here that there was some Where did I see it? Windows embedded, Windows 7 embedded in some reason, and this is probably a license sticker or something for that. So this probably is installed with Windows still, and there is no serial ATA socket here as far as I can see to connect up all the drives. Of course you have a lot of USB, and you also have 2 USB slots in the front along with audio slots. We forgot to mention them earlier. So there is no empty sockets here for serial ATA either. There are some sockets here for ROM recovery and other things that's not populated. But since this is a PC Express something, we probably can put some storage into here too if need be. Yeah, I just think we put this back together and try to apply some power. And as I said, I have 4 of these units, so if this one is not working, one or more of the others is probably working, even though they had been dumped in this dumpster. I don't think they was damaged. And I do know which company these came from, but I'm not going to reveal that, as someone probably will get some heat for throwing these out in the trash and not recycling them properly. And putting this all back together is what all lovers of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy know as a gib-gnab. That is a big bang backwards. This screws was a bit difficult because it's metal stands that reach all the way to the top. So there was no hole for these to fall into before we started to screw them in. And now that's connected. And these all here was for the fastening to the VESA bracket slot, and I thought this was dismountable, but it's not. So these screws is actually to fasten these to a VESA bracket, but I don't know why they have bothered to actually screw them in, because these screws are so short they have no reuse value at all if you're going to use this on a VESA kind of bracket or something. Like so. And then it was these two. I'm not going to take it all the way if you need to open it again. But then my next step is to connect power to these, and either I have to go down to my bunker and find a HP power supply, or I do have to jiggle some universal power supply to fit into this. And here I have found some plug that's meant to be on an original power supply, and this is a 2-pin plug. And although this plug really is 3-pin, they are supposed to work like this. So we just have to measure out what is plus and what is minus, or earth and positive lead. And this is supposed to be ground on the outside and positive on the inside. So we just measure this out so that we can solder leads direct to these pins. And at first I didn't get good contact to the inside of the barrel that is supposed to be plus, but it was only because I was holding the measuring pin not quite in the right angle. And I will just solder up this and use my trusty old bench power supply, put it on 19.5 volt something, and the power supply should be able to deliver 3 amps, but I really don't think that it will draw that much. And I'm just going to solder this straight to the pins on this jack, and this I have done numerous of times, and I always keep the rest of the pins from these universal power supplies just for this purpose, and I do have lots of them, and they always seems to come in handy when you are doing work on old machines. And even though these pins look to be chromed, I find that they do solder easily, and some of the things that's this kind of shiny surface, it's almost impossible to solder, but these pins I always manage to solder quite easily. And I just tin the pins and I tin the solder wire, and they quite easily melts into place when I heat them afterwards. To the other ends of these leads I will solder 4mm jacks that I can use to connect easily to banana plugs for my power supply. But this is not quite as easy as it is on the jacks that I get from the universal power supplies. Actually, these I quite have to scratch away some of the shiny surface to be able to have the solder to stick at all. Otherwise I will melt all the plastics before they will take solder. At the banana plug ends I'm going to use some heat shrink tube to isolate the big metal surfaces so they don't short out as easily. And as you probably can see, I do struggle a bit with making solder stick to this jack, and this yellow one, it's about okay, but as you see I can't get the solder to stick on the blue one. Yeah, but with a good bit of scraping I was able to get the solder to stick, and I did choose some heat shrink tube that was a bit too narrow, but I am able to make them isolate the metal, but I just had to wiggle it a bit because one of them actually ripped open. As you can see, I go a bit berserk with the colors, but actually yellow is a good color to use for ground or minus, but I'm out of red jacks, so that's why the plus one had to be blue. But I do manage to avoid confusing them as long as the other one is yellow. Even though in this scary scenario I have used a red and a blue wire from the power supply, and of course the blue wire from the power supply should of course be yellow or black. But we have to run with what we got. And here I measure out that they actually have 19 point something volt, and that the orientation is correct, so that I have plus on the inside and minus on the outside of this barrel jack. Yeah, and here I just confirm that this is an ordinary HP power supply and that the outside of the barrel jack actually is connected to the ground plane on the computer. It's better to be safe than sorry when it comes to these things. Yeah, and I can confirm that everything is as it should be. The ground is actually ground, and we can test this further. And by now connecting the power leads are live with 19.5 volt. We actually do have standby power on this unit. But I'm used to there being a LED that lights up when you do have some kind of standby power on every kind of HP computer, but I can't see that here. And nothing happens when I do push the power button, and I do try to keep it in, I do try to push it lightly and so on, but nothing happens. So I do have to confirm that I have power, and that I have. So there is something other at hand here, and maybe there is a fault on this unit, or there might be something wrong with the way we have connected power into the device. So here I actually have two sources of fault. It could be the device itself and it could be the power supply. And as I have three more of these units, the easiest thing to test is just to test this with one of the other devices and see if that actually works with this power supply. But the results are the same with this unit, so that means that I actually screwed up something with the power supply. But this got me thinking a bit. I do know that the HP power supply is a 3-pin power supply, and I do know that it's minus on the, or ground on the outside of the barrel jack, it's plus on the inside, and I do know that there is some kind of signaling on the inner pin. Might be some kind of power good signal, but I do know that on Dell and Lenovo's, this pin actually sends a signal that tells me how much wattage the power supply can deliver. What I next thought was, is there some way of faking this? And I actually did think of something straight away, and that was trying with a resistor just to pull the center pin on the HP high. I can't do that on the power supply side as I only have 2 pins, but I will try this on the inside with just a loose resistor. So I will try just by holding a 1K resistor from plus to the center pin. And voila, it actually seems like it will start. The standby light lights up. So the next step will be to solder in the resistor in a more permanent way, and I do think I will try to find a bigger resistor. A 1K resistor is actually quite a power draw even on 19.5 volt, and I will try this with let's say a 10K resistor, and if it starts with that, I will use that. It's a safer value anyway if there are some inputs that draws power on this. Yes, as we can see, it even starts with this 10K resistor. As this is a China resistor, I do have to measure it before we solder it in. And it is 10K, so we are good to go. This is a bit fiddly, especially the middle leg that is very thin on the connector on the back. I could of course have found a place on the PCB to place it, but this is only a temporary hack. But it is important that we don't short out anything. And with a 10K resistor, I do even think that this will work with an original power supply. Yeah, so let's plug in the VGA again and see if we can get any picture on the screen. I do think that this will boot just fine now. Yeah, at least it's starting up, and there we got some BIOS message on the screen. And yeah, it looks like it starts to boot Windows. Yeah, let's do some fast forward. And the machine actually boot totally into the login screen, but as there is some custom wallpaper and some other signs that will give away who was previously the owner of this computer, I just turned it off. Yeah, so instead I will erase the disk and install some other operating system on this device. On this unit it was F10 to open the CMOS settings menu. And this is an ordinary BIOS. It looks the same as on all, at least same vintage HP machine have about the same BIOS. And we do some checks here to check that the boot properties are set for installing other operating systems. And all looks good. It's even set to boot on a USB device before it boots on an SSD device, and that makes us able to boot this through a Linux setup disk or other operating systems if need be. There are some BIOS updates available on the internet for this unit, but I don't think I will bother to install any BIOS update before we do our attempt to install Linux on this device. My choice here was to install the Linux Lite operating system. I've had good success with this on earlier occasions. It's a full desktop environment and it's light on both disk space and needed memory. And it's well within the specification of this machine. Actually, it's able to run with much less resources that this machine can offer. And I choose to install it direct to disk and not run it via the USB pen drive first. The installation actually quite took some time to complete, and every picture you see here is at least now played with 5 times the speed, often 10 times the speed, to speed up the process. There are not many options we have to fill out while we do the installation, but of course we have to choose the language for the installation and for the keyboard, and I choose to use US in both cases. We also have to choose and verify that we want to install this on the disk and overwrite what's already there and to use the whole disk. As I'm located in Norway, I choose to use the time zone for Oslo. We keep the default Linux Lite username, and I also apply a password, and as you can see I also show it in plain text so you guys can help me remember it. And then it's just to sit back and relax and view the installation take place. And this takes a long time, and I do think that this is caused by the slow SSD drive that's in here. I think if I've installed this on a real SSD drive with a good proper controller, this would have speed up the process at least 3 or 4 times. And for the first boot, I am reminded that I did not take out the USB drive after the installation was finished copying the files onto the drive. Yeah, now the installation is completed, but we do of course have to install some updates, and I start browsing around inside the interface here to see what actually is installed. And I am a bit disappointed to see that there is no Tetris on this machine. And I do have as a rule, and every time I try an old machine to really test it, I have to play a game of Tetris to see that everything is running smoothly. So that's my first task. I install a Tetris clone and test a game of Tetris to see how this runs. Light Linux comes with its own software handler, that's Light Software, and it also comes with another packet manager from Synaptic, but I'm using the Light Software that comes built in and find what I want to install, and the software installs. As you can see, there is quite a good collection of software already installed in Light Linux. And I can't complain on this. The graphics run smooth, the colors are great, so the graphic drivers probably works as they should. And the computer is more than happy to handle this. And as you saw, my game of Tetris did not go that great, but you always need 2 or 3 games to, you get used to the controls and the knickknacks of each game. But then we again run into some speed issues. I'm going to update the system to have it updated with all the patches that's available through the built-in update tool. And this takes a long time. So everything you see here is speed up 10 times. And I do think that I've cut away some of the footage too, because this was taking almost an hour to complete. There is a good troubleshooting and technical guide for this model available over at HP's website, and it do describe much of the use of this device, but it's have a very generic approach and doesn't tell you much in detail about some things, but it do tell you about how to go about reformatting and entering the BIOS. It also tells you the technical specifications about humidity, about power draw, and so on. And this device is actually rated to draw 65 watts of heat, and I'm nowhere near that with what I've been doing here. I have connected this to my lab power supply, and at no times has the power draw reached more than 1 amps. So this is clearly overrated with the 3.3 amp power supply. It might draw more if you are using some more of the graphic features. There are 2 display ports on this. And it's also able to run with more memory and a bigger SSD drive. So probably, but I don't think in any way this will reach 2 amps in power draw. And this is where we leave our HP T520 for this time. We do have experienced that the system is working. We do have learned a thing or two about HP power supplies and how we can Euro-rig that they start even though if you don't have an original power supply. And we also experienced some lags and we experience some of the speed of this system. And I do think that this systems lags because a slow SSD drive, and we're certainly going to test that at some time in the future. But this is it for this episode. This has been a somewhat unusual episode. This is a system that's maybe 6 or 7 years old, I'm not sure. And that's not what we normally do here, where we normally handle things that's 30 or 40 years old. So please leave a comment, and hope to see you again in my next episode. Please hit like and subscribe if you want to be notified when we post new contents. See you in the next one.